Thank you for your indulgence. We have the IT problem rectified, hopefully. I'm going to ask the city clerk to do another roll call to make sure we haven't lost anyone.
Councillor Carlson.
Present.
Councillor Kaufman.
Present.
Councillor Crowson.
Here.
Councillor Morrow.
Yeah.
Councillor Parker.
Yes.
Acting Mayor Hagan.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Miyashiro.
Here.
Mayor Spearman.
Here.
Councillor Campbell.
Present.
Present, thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to remind council too that items 4.5 through 4.12 are for information only right now, and we will address the decision about the funding when we go through the different business units. Thank you. Item 4.5, we have Simon Griffiths and Chief Medizadeh from the Lethbridge City Police. Sorry, Lethbridge Police Service.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Good morning, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. What we're going to do this morning is I'm going to make a few opening remarks, and then I am assuming that there are a plethora of questions to be asked of us. Obviously, we have the Chief here and members of his senior team. I understand there's two items that we are going to be addressing this morning. The one is the continuation or otherwise of the three initiatives that were funded by Council a couple of years ago, and in terms of which a presentation was made, I think, to Council in October, showing how successful the three programs were and the recommendation that the funding be continued. The other item of business is the proposed budget reductions. So I'd like to set the context, and I will speak no longer than a couple of minutes. So as we know, the Lethbridge Police Service budget is in the region of $42 million per annum. Of that $42 million, $4 million is from other income, so leaving a balance of about $38 million, which is city funded. Of that $40 million, the compensation costs and also the recharges from the city to the police service account for around about 92% of the budget. So that leaves around about $3 million for non-pay and non-transfer costs. So that would include things like guns, uniforms, legal fees, insurance, etc., not insurance, and legal fees. So any significant budget reduction would have an impact on bodies. There's not an awful lot of play in the budget. So there was a document that you were provided, I think, a number of days ago, which sets out the possible avenues that could be addressed in the event of a budget cut. Not all of them would be done. It would depend on the quantum of the budget reduction, but it gives you a flavour and also an idea of the consequences that would happen if those items were indeed addressed in terms of a budget reduction. The budget process is that council votes, whatever the term is, votes an amount of money to the police service, and then the police commission, forgive me, my mask keeps sliding down, the police commission together with the chief of police and his executive team then allocate that budget as they see fit. What I want to say in closing is I'm not here to suggest that the police service is anything special or more important than the other emergency services that we have in the city. But what I am here to say is that crime in Lethbridge is on the increase. We unfortunately were awarded an epithet in terms of which we were told that we are the most dangerous city in Canada to live in. And it's going to be difficult enough to get off that podium with the existing resources that we get, let alone in the face of any budget reductions. So finally, I'd like to say that Lethbridge is home to us all, and it's an economic truism that you get what you pay for. So I have got no doubt that council has spent an awful lot of time deliberating about what they wish to do with the budget, and we are now open to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Griffiths. Sir Higgin? Acting Mayor Higgin.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Griffiths and Chief Medizida, for your presentation. A question I have, and it was a comment that would come from what was mentioned regarding the most dangerous city in Canada to live in, and you're concerned with the overall budget and any reductions being that majority that would be, I guess, feet on the street, to put it bluntly, and those that are combating this crime. We've seen here that there's some reductions, and the question I would have to either yourself or the chief or his designate: if the police service was to remain at a 0% increase, because we don't see any additions currently to the budget, is that something that could be worked with? And I know we went through some of the slides, and I've noticed that to hold the line that could be worked with currently. Is that correct in saying that?
I'm going to comment on that. That's absolutely, these are the times, and again, I realize the economic impact, not only on the city, the province, the whole country. So status quo is actually something that certainly our department would be happy with. In relation to status quo, since I've been here and with the good work of a lot of the people, we're looking at efficiencies that we can build within our programs on two different fronts. Number one is to increase the service level to the community with what we have, and number two, coming up with programs to focus on crime trends that are going on, so we can better address them. And there's some initiatives that are going to be coming up in the new year. For example, the ComStat and more engagement with citizens, etc., to try to bring that crime trend down. Because again, the success of any city or community, when there's increasing crime, there's that bad negative perception from that plagues a community that we'd really want to, as Simon mentioned, we want to kind of give our place on the podium to another city and get off that, and hopefully get on a downward trend to show the people that this is a safe city to live in. And when you increase safety, the community is going to prosper because it's going to attract a good element into it. The other way will only attract a criminal or bad element.
Thank you, because I was just looking through some of the information that we'd received, and I understand that there is costs that will increase because of collective bargaining agreements that we've had in the past. That is tough to get around, and so I see there's going to be an increase in wages, and so you believe, just to be sure, that the efficiencies that you can implement over the next time will be able to help with those increases that we are unable to really do much about. Is that correct?
I believe we can do that, and even with the wage increase, this is something that's subject to negotiations. And again, I'm not here to speak on behalf of any union, but any union going to negotiations these days with the economic nature of what we are going through, I believe they need to be a little more responsible as to what they're asking for. Because, again, it's all great to increase wages, but sometimes when it comes at the cost of letting people go, really that's not the right formula either. But those are negotiations that are going to be coming up, and I certainly have my view of how hopefully those should be done. But I'm quite happy with status quo as far as resourcing goes. And again, we continue to look at different ways to make sure we are bringing more efficiencies into our operations.
Great. Thank you very much again for the presentation, and thank you for those answers. Appreciate it.
Councillor Croson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you both to the chair and to the chief for their presentation. Yeah, one of the things you have to be aware of is that we've had 20 years of budget increases in the city of Lethbridge, 20 years of tax increases. And in those 20 years, we've seen a lot of haves come to a lot of groups and not necessarily the needs. And we've also seen some duplication across different departments. The city has a finance department. The city has an IT department. Does the police have their own finance and IT departments?
Yes, we do, but for the size of the city, the police that we have here, we need those components. And at any time when we've had to actually have the city, when people go on vacations or maternity leave or they're leaving their jobs, we need to hire more people. When we have to go ask the city to help us, it comes at a significant challenge to the city because they don't have the capacity to do what they're due for the city and also help the police department. And I can share with you, when you look at finances, the people who are working our finances is absolutely, they're busy all day long and then some. To put that pressure on the city resources within this compound, I don't believe they can actually deliver on that, and if they do, it's going to come at significant cost again to them because they have to hire more people. So the size of our city police calls for those components to be actually managed within the house because it takes special level of expertise and also understanding of what is going on within the world of policing. And I don't believe it's a concept that can be managed by the city taking that over, and if they do, I'm sure it's going to cost them the same level of resources and money to manage that.
So you're saying this duplication is good for the city? That's what I should tell the citizens?
I don't call it a duplication because, again, we are working within the police world, but this is not duplication because if these positions weren't sitting in our building, there's going to be additional positions sitting in the city hall or buildings to be doing that work. The amount of work that's required to do that, I don't believe you can cut the positions here and add it to the workload of the city employees who are already doing the work that they are doing. So all I'm saying is that I don't believe it's duplication. It's just the work that needs to be done and the resources that need to be invested on it. Either they sit within the police department or in the city. So I don't believe there is any savings on that we are going to realize.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor Spearman.
Thank you very much. I want to clarify one thing with respect to the crime statistics. Crime statistics have been not great, but the survey that came out was census metropolitan areas. And while we came #1 in that, there were actually about 4 other cities in Alberta that actually have worse crime rates than Lethbridge. I think that needs to be clear. So having said that, I'd like to commend the Lethbridge Police Services for their innovation over the last few years. And I do appreciate programs like the Watch and like our community peace officers, the PAC team, and more recently, the crime suppression team. I think it's made a significant difference, and those have been very positive. So along the lines of what Councillor Crowson has been asking, if we at the city believe that we can achieve efficiencies by consolidating services, which don't affect service on the street, would the police service support that?
Again, I certainly have to see how those are going to look like, and are we going to get the service that we need? Because when you look at the areas that you mentioned, such as HR, finance, etc., as long as we continue to get the service that we need, because I see the folks, the way they are working, and daily I'm in touch with them a few times just to go over things and make sure that we are on the right track. So as long as we're going to get the service that we need, again, I'm not against anything, that's your decision. But what I was trying to explain is these are not duplication of services. These are the services that are required. It's just either people do it sitting in our building or they do it in a different location. But there's significant amount of work these folks do every day, and a lot of pressure on them that they need to deliver on. So,
One moment.
Thank you.
City Manager would like to make a comment.
Just to add to the chief's comment, this was one of the questions that we asked Kpmg to look at through the operational review process. Their initial feedback to us so far is that they do not see any efficiencies in consolidating HR, IT, finance, those types of services. Not off the bat, and they've said that because the workload assessment suggests that the right number of people exist in our organization and in LPS to do that work. So it's not duplication of service. They're not suggesting we don't look at it further, but it's not something they've identified as an opportunity to find an efficiency.
Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thanks, Chair Griffiths and Chief Mediza. I thank you for all the work that you've put into this and prepared for us. And looking through some of the sheets, how you've done some reduction initiatives and ranked them for us to look at. I do appreciate that. But a lot of these are just straight reductions and removals. And I'm going to sort of sound like a broken record here. It's reported to us over and over at every LPS presentation that over 70% of the calls that police receive are not police calls, and they shouldn't be dealing with those. And so I'm wondering what work has been done to look at what dollars, what funding could be redirected to services that could answer and attend those calls, and what kind of efficiencies could we get out of that? The same work would be getting done in attending those calls, but it wouldn't be sworn officers. It could be a completely different service, which would free up a lot of time for the work that officers should be doing. So has any of that work ever been done?
short answer to your question is yes. In fact, since I've been here, I've been engaged with many out of our partners who need to take a more active role in some of the issues, such as mental health, addiction, etc. That's really the community is suffering from. The problem is if the city was to divert the money to Alberta Health, for example, I don't think that's going to go well. Because again, when you look at health, which is really looking at mental health and addiction issues, the province has so much budget, and we continue to discuss their role and how they can actually help us better, because we have clients in this city who are actually sucking resources from both police and mental health and Alberta Health. So how can we work better together? The problem is they're under budget pressures and resource pressures as well. So anytime statements are made to change the status quo, so more skilled organizations can deal with the core cause of issues that are increasing the call for service for police, status quo doesn't sit well with other agencies because they have to take on more. And if they ignore that, the police has to be responsible for that. But even in those cases, if we were to say, for example, the mental health issues, only Alberta Health is going to respond to them. They never do. They always want police presence to make sure they are safe, because we are dealing with volatile situation, people who are under different levels of stress, mental health, addiction issues, that the police needs to be there to keep people safe. So even if you were to divert more money, is that going to relieve some pressures on us? Absolutely. But are we still required to be there to keep people safe? I would say we have to, because we can't just ignore those calls and let them go about doing their business and putting them at risk. So there's always pressure on police to deal with it. And even when give you a simple example. When there's a suicide call and the paramedics are called to go to a suicide call, we have to be there with them. It's not something that they can just go do on their own, because they need to have that assurance that they're safe.
All right. Well, thank you for that then, because that leads me to believe that the numbers that I've been hearing about the 70% aren't police calls isn't accurate. If they have to attend, that strikes me as it's a police matter.
Well, the numbers that you're talking about has to do with if more work was done in relation to mental health, addiction, to actually help people versus arresting them and putting them in jail. Yes, that would certainly help the police, so it relieves the pressure on the police. But those are, as you know, very time-consuming, lengthy programs. And in fact, some of those programs, are they going to be done overnight or within a matter of few months? Those are stuff that needs to be done today, hopefully for the next generation of people to be in a better standing from mental health, addiction issues, etc. But the way we talk about today, when we talk about most calls are not police related, is in a sense that if more organizations were actually had been more engaged to do their job, those would not even be calls that we'll have to respond to, because those people have got the support and expertise that they need to fix them, versus police being called several times a day for the same individual doing the same thing. So it's all about that. Like when you look at mental health calls that come for service from the citizens, somebody acting out in downtown core, sometimes many times a day, really all we do is we deal with it, but either we arrest them or we send them on their way just to go back to the same individual to deal with him again in a few hours. Had there been more investment in helping this individual to actually get him off the street and give them the mental health support that they need, those few calls for service a day for that individual are going to be taken off the list. So those are the calls that we are talking about. Is we still have to respond, because if people feel unsafe, they're going to call us. They're not going to call Alberta Health or paramedics to deal with the situation downtown. They call the police. But is this that fully police function to go help that person in a mental health crisis? Not necessarily.
Thank you for that answer. Thank you for talking about that. I'm going to have to think about that a bit more. But I appreciate the response. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Dr. Griffiths. Thank you, Chief Medizita, for the information for the presentation. Just one councillor's perspective, we provide the envelope to the Commission. It's the Commission's responsibility and authority to allocate the resources they see fit. So I'm not diving very deeply at all into any of these matters. I'm just trying to understand the envelope that we provide. In terms of Chief, your last statements, I think, are bang on, and I think is what Council is trying to address. It's about more investment into helping. When your options and the options of your officers is arrest or don't arrest, that doesn't actually address the issue that the individual or individuals are necessarily facing. So how can we do that? How can we help? Can you just briefly advise the Finance Committee as to how the CPOs are working and can continue to be worked into the department to address some of these 70% calls, as opposed to tying up sworn officers who can be doing investigations or be dealing with the more serious crime in our community?
So the role of CPOs is that intermediary unit that's between the police and basically citizens. So they provide service to, they dispatch to calls for service that doesn't necessarily need a police officer, but they can handle at that level. They're still peace officers, they just don't carry guns and they come at a lower cost. So they divert a lot of those calls that if they weren't present, we have to send our gun-carrying police officers with much higher wage to deal with. So they'll be helping us on that front. And between them and the watch program, I believe in last presentation we made is they have kind of deflected about almost 8,000 calls for service to the department because of what they do and the role that they take on in the community and public safety. So which is critical, because if those 8,000 calls, if they are not there, those calls are made to the department, that's going to put more pressure on the police officers to do a lot more with, and we're not capable of taking that on. And if we do, it's going to be the hierarchy of what calls we attend and what calls we don't. With the CPOs also, when I want to add that they're not just like they do generate some revenue for the city with the ticketing, etc., the functions that they do. And our CPO program too, even though we have many communities in the past who've started the CPO program many years ago, so we kind of caught up with that. But our CPOs, we are based on approval from the province, we are training them on even more things that they can actually perform more function than average CPOs in this province. And once that training is done, I think they'll be even more valuable to what we are trying to do with our initiatives. So if these programs weren't present, the equation becomes that all that work has to be taken over by the 172 police officers. So in that sense, we'll be having to come to the council to ask for 10, 15 more police officers, because it's just citizens are not getting the service they deserve. So these programs are actually delivering on giving the service to the community, but not spending the money that we have been. When you talk about police defunding, it's not just about getting rid of police officers, it's about same programs that we are talking about to take some of the pressures off the police, because I personally want, and this discussions with the executive team, we want to focus more on crime and reducing that picture and those trends in this community. And I rather our police officers are focused more on that because, again, we certainly owe it to the citizen and this community to show a downward trend on crime in the city, period. And that's those programs that you talked about with the CPOs, the watch, are going to provide us an opportunity to actually focus more on what police has to do. As you know, they're both new programs. The CPOs, we just hired 5 more. So now once the new class graduates, they're up to their full complement, which gives us an opportunity to make sure that they're doing the jobs. For example, some of the jobs they do is front counter, dealing with our hearings in cell block. If they are not present, we have to put gun-carrying police officers at much higher cost to do those functions.
Thank you. So is it heresy for me to ask the question I'm about to ask? If the large component of the envelope that we provide to the Police Commission is for wages, and it's predominantly for wages of sworn officers, we want, you're absolutely correct, the defund police movement is about the reallocation of limited resources into preventing the need for police officers. And we all want to see crime disappear. That's the perfect society. And I think we'd like the police to be like the firefighters. They're a necessity when we need them. Absolutely. So is it heresy to propose that part of the way the commission were to look at wages would be that instead of replacing sworn officers, the reallocation of resources would include an increase in CPOs to deal with this 70%. I'm not saying make it a 70-30 split, but I'm saying instead of hiring more sworn officers, we actually increase the complement of CPOs to help the community deal with these more social situations as opposed to crime situations. And then you can reallocate the sworn officers to do what police are wanting to do, which is to stop crime.
Well, the 15 CPOs, as I said, we just hired 5 more, so we'll be able to actually figure out exactly the impact they're going to have now that they have a full complement in the near future. But I do agree that do we need, and that's why these programs were initiated. Instead of getting 10 or 15 more police officers, the CPOs were suggested and approved, hired, and now they're actually taking that work away from the police so we can better focus on root causes or on crime. The CPOs, as I said, they can do more with the training that we are giving them, but they can't do everything. So for now, as I mentioned before, we are not looking for more police officers. For what we have within the CPO complement, the watch program, the police, I believe the community is getting good service from Lethbridge Police Service. And all we talk about is any reduction is going to actually have an impact, because as you even see in the document we provided, the exercise would have been very easy just to get rid of one program, let's say CPOs and a bunch of civilian staff and kind of come up to the numbers that we wanted to reach. But our discussions weren't about that. It's just about what is important. Yeah, do we have to cut some of the CPOs if there's reduction in our budget? Absolutely, but that comes with actual reduction in our full-time police officers as well, that we need to manage that budget. So again, your statement is right. Can we invest more money in the future? But I would say we just have to wait and see what other programs we want to bring in the city from the crime reduction perspective, and where other resources at lower cost can deliver, and bring that to obviously council for approval and moving forward. But your statement is true. We can certainly beat some of the other programs. But what we are saying is reducing the complement right now. First of all, it's not the right time or approach because of the crime trends in this city. And also by reducing that, it's not just saving dollar amounts, it's putting more pressure on the officers. The perception of the safe community is going to be actually getting worse. And also it's going to put pressure on the people who are left behind to have to carry out more job. So that would also include issues like more sick leave, more absenteeism from work. And that's just a revolving thing that we are going to be having to deal with in the future. Also, to finish that off, to reduce the numbers right now, because again, when you look at the union and a lot of the people that if we have to let people go, it's going to be the more junior people that we just hired within the last few years. We invested a lot of time to hire them, to train them, to make them police officers. To actually allowing them to walk out that door is going to be a significant negative impact to this department and to this city, because as I've mentioned before, if we do that and we try to hire new people who would really want to come to a job policing in a policing board, that they are not sure about their future in 2-3 years down the road. So these are not about just like, I don't look at a police officer as a $130,000 saving. I look at them, if they have to walk out those doors, millions of dollars walking out those doors. That's how I look at them.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chair Griffiths. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Croson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. If I understand, Chief, you came to us from the Mounted Police, from the RCMP, who have certainly had to deal with, in different areas, budget cuts. How did the Mounted Police deal with budget cuts across the board?
It depends on the contract, because Mounted Police has obviously provincial contract with the provinces that we serve, and also municipal contract with cities. Like the closest city I can talk about is Red Deer Detachment, which is very similar size. But even in Red Deer, we have more police officers in RCMP compared to Lethbridge, and also their support staff is, I guess they have about 40 more support staff in that detachment than Lethbridge Police Service. So when you actually compare apples to apples, even from the Mounted Police perspective, there is that component. But the one thing with Mounted Police, obviously, is their officers don't get paid as much as some of the other municipalities. from the wage perspective. So that might be a component that they are managing. But that's going to change really soon because mounted police, as you know, did not have a union or association, but now they have one. And there's negotiations going on with the Treasury Board. And I believe the only thing on the agenda right now is their wages, which is going to increase. So that whole formula is going to be changing. In the Mounties, we always did the work, more work for less money. It was a common thing we did because of lack of union at the times. And but that whole concept is also going to change. So the only way we managed the budget pressures within the mounted police was to run vacancies, purposely running vacancies. But in a mounted police environment, it's much easier because you have 18, 20,000 people that when the attrition rate is much higher, and if somebody retires, you just don't fill the position because that's the easiest way to manage a budget. Don't just leave it vacant and don't pay somebody to do the job. With the union coming in, I believe all those things are going to change as far as running vacancies, getting people to work more with less, we're getting free time from people, and also the wages. So, again, I'm going around, but I just want to give you a good perception. The bottom line was that we were running vacancies and asking people to do more with less for the time period, and people had no choice but to do it because we want to serve the communities better. But I think all those are going to be changing with the association coming in play and a new level of negotiations with the Treasury Board. The days of the handshake and our CMP and Treasury Board handshake deals are done. Now there's going to be contracts with the association that have to be respected in the future.
Thanks. I come from the world of not-for-profit prior to this. I'm certainly used to doing more with less. I mean, that's certainly something many of us have done before. Thank you.
Acting Mayor Hagan.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I just want to hop back to a question that was asked earlier about the defund the police movement that is going on regarding duplication of services and reallocation of resources. I'm looking at something like this would require obviously a strategic plan or an integrated approach, I guess. Can someone help me understand if this is actually being done, if there's a group that's doing this, or in order to get this integrated approach, is there a strategic plan out there to help with these quote unquote duplication of services that have been mentioned? And I'm not sure who can answer that. Sorry if it's Chief or I don't know if there's any administration or that could find out if something is being done with that right now.
I can give you a general answer to that. The answer is yes. We are always in discussion with different partners we have in the community. And in our case, I've already met with Alberta Health, with some of our homes that are providing services to for addiction, etc., in this community. And we're always trying to get people to do, basically to partner with us to get the job done. But again, the one problem is, I've always hit a roadblock in any discussion is when you speak to those executives, the issue is they don't have enough. They don't have more to give. And again, breaking status quo is going to put pressure on them as well. So, but this is something that eventually, obviously, the municipalities have discussions with the province, with healthcare, etc., to see if more could be allocated to certain services that they can provide. When you look at even our PACT team, we have one team, one police officer, one AHS employee, which is great to have, but really is one team working on basically just a few hours here and there, and a lot of their job is reactive, going after the fact, sometimes 3-4 weeks after an incident to deal with the situation. Is that really providing the best level of impact that they can bring to what they do? A PAC team that would be valuable and purposeful would be if you have these teams running 24/7 with our patrol teams, so they can go have immediate, basically presence, proactive with the people that we deal with who are in mental health crisis, so they can give the help to them at that time, and hopefully get them the support they need. What we do is better than nothing at all, but can we do that much better? Absolutely. That would take more resources from us, I know that. But when I go to the table with Alberta Health to say, if I throw, say, one more person into the loop, and are you willing to give me one more to maybe even go with 2 teams, say, in the summer times when we have school resource officers who might be not being as busy. The roadblock I always hear is we don't have enough resources. So I'm willing, from the policing department, we are having those discussions, different partners, trying to see what we can do together to help the community better. But again, I'm also very realistic in knowing that they don't have the budget that they typically need to kind of support some of these programs. But I can share with you, we are constantly having discussions with different groups, different clients, different partners to see where we can see efficiencies and working together to better serve the community. Because the days that the silos, police does this, you do that, those days are gone. A lot of these people who are out there needing our services, they're also needing other services. So they're, how can I put it in a nice way? They're sucking basically resources from everyone, which is really not the right approach.
So I take it then you're working on a written plan then to isolate some of these efficiencies and how this could be done then? You're currently doing that?
We are currently doing that, but the efforts all, it's not what we want to do, it's what they can do also. So those are the discussions that we're putting proposals forward, having discussions, but if they are not willing to kind of play within those guidelines and where we want to go, really, I can't pressure Alberta Health to do whatever if they don't want to do something. All we can do is keep negotiating and talking to them, and hopefully we can come to a resolution to make sure the service levels are better. In fact, I've met with them and tried to even pilot some programs to see if there's any value in them and how we can actually assess that moving forward. But discussions typically have come to basically the end of the discussion is no resources, no money, so we can't do that. But we'll continue pressuring on that front. And I'm not the only chief here that does that. Every police chief in this country is doing exactly what we are doing here, because this is not a problem just for Lethbridge. This is a problem for every community in this country.
Okay. And my second question, if I could, Deputy Mayor, the CPOs, I was looking at the reduction here when we were looking at school resource officers, one of the things that you had mentioned. And I'm just curious to know, is it a possibility to staff the schools? Because I know at an earlier age is when I believe, I guess I might as well just say that I'm concerned with not having police officers in schools and at an early age. And I know that we give this pot of money that was mentioned before, and your decisions would be the decisions of the commission yourself. I'm just wondering if it's possible to have CPOs in the schools rather than sworn police officers, for example.
For some delivery of some programs, yes, but overall, no, because the school resource officers are not just there to give high fives to kids and do presentations to them. They're actually investigating a lot of crimes that are going on in schools, assaults and other types of crime that CPOs are not able to do based on their approvals from the province, etc. So the police officers are actually doing a lot more than just engagement with youth. They're actually taking on active files, investigations, and but certain areas, certainly we can look at CPOs taking that role on, but we still need police officers in schools.
All right, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Mayor Spearman.
Thank you. Follow-up question to Councillor Higgins' question regarding police officers and in schools. I'm not sure if it's for administration or for police services. Do the school divisions contribute financially in any way to, and if so, how much towards police officers in schools?
I have to check with someone. 60,000? That's for all the positions? So they do contribute $60,000 for those programs.
60,000 for five officers?
That's per member, right? One payment? So one payment of 60,000 for that program as a whole.
So they contribute 60,000, but it costs us maybe 600,000.
Yeah,
Okay.
900 actually. So.
Costs us 900,000? Okay, thank you. My second question, really, I mean this respectfully, but I'm just looking historically at costs. And this year, Lethbridge Police Services are forecast to be in a balanced position. But unspent wages were $1,280,000. So we didn't hire peace officers and didn't fulfill our programs to the way that we expected. But somehow we spent the rest of the money. And we're going to be in a balanced position by the end of 2020. How much of that money that was spent due to the shortfall in wages was discretionary, and how much was necessary?
So the money that you're talking about, I believe, I'm going to have Kamran to come and speak to those BAUs and the budget, because he can give a more sober discussion, actually presentation on that. But it had to do with the BAUs that go to the future year, obviously, the money that wasn't spent for due to different reasons, i.e. we didn't have the resources in place, and like in that case, there was some money from training because of COVID. We couldn't give the training that we typically give our officers. We had to cut down on that, so there was savings of that went to the future. But I can bring maybe Kamran so he can present you, at least give you more better idea on that.
Thank you. So for clarification, the amount that we budget is $36,740,000.
Yep.
And the expenses are going to be exactly that.
Yeah, so the saving you see in the wages and benefits are related to the community peace officers. So 350,000 of the 1.28 million is of the CPOs, because as obviously we didn't have that 15 starting January 1. Then another 30,000 is for the watch. Again, due to COVID, during the summertime, we had the saving from there. 480,000 is for the police officer wages because of the six vacancies, right? So there were some acting pays and that in, but that is the 480,000. And then due to COVID, we have a unused vacation accrual for 420,000. So all of that is that $1.28 million.
Okay, so in the expense explanation, it says the operating expenses are going to be over budget, and we're going to spend money on police range upgrade, more uniforms, security contracts, computer supplies, and cell phone costs. So if we didn't save the money on the wages, if we had hired everybody, would we still have gone ahead with these expenses?
No, so if we have everybody, all the FTs were fully staffed, so 172 officers and 64 civilian, our operating budget or the operating expense line is about $3.3 million, and that's all the money we have. So we won't be able to spend some of these things, but since we have that saving in the wages, we're at the end of 2020, we're requesting 2 BAUs. One is for body-worn and in-car cameras for $240,000. That is also included the operating expenses, as well as training that we're requesting for carry forward to 2021 from 2020. That's the $300,000 for that training. So $540,000 of the total expense that you see on the right side column, under the operating expenses, we're requesting that as a BAU. So if those BAUs were not approved by the city manager, those would, at the end of the year, they would show as a surplus of $540.
Okay, so you actually under budget and you're asking for additional supports for these new initiatives.
Yeah, so just one, the body worn, the training is the carry forward because we didn't have any training done in 2020.
Okay, thank you.
If I can explain that, Mr. Mayor, when we have checked the years that we are not spending as much money as we thought because of different reasons, these are some of the programs that we still need to bring in the future. It's still going to come on but now that we're saving money here, we can actually put that money towards the program so we don't come to the city later on asking for those for more money for that. So we are just trying to somehow manage those programs that we want to bring to the city, like body-worn cameras. There's a big discussion on that. Do we need them today? Maybe not. But eventually it's going to become a norm that police forces need to have that for basically right reasons. So instead of doing that, right now that we see some money that we haven't spent due to people not enough people working, etc., we can actually take those, push those items forward so it doesn't provide pressure to the city later on that we have to come back to ask for more. It's either doing it today or tomorrow, but I can share if we had 172, like everybody was working every day, we probably wouldn't be having any savings whatsoever. In fact, we may not even have enough. But when we are actually showing these funds that we haven't spent, we are trying to put them towards programs that are eventually going to be needed for this department, but it's not coming at extra cost to the taxpayers later on. Or we can go with the formula that the money can be given back, but later on we're going to come back ask for it back. So it all depends on how the city wants to look at it. These are the things that are coming. When is the appropriate time to actually go ahead with these programs to at least have them there and then ready for the future. So.
I appreciate the answer, and I'm just trying to understand what's the right amount to fund the police, and that's, as Councillor Kaufman has said, once we allocate the money, you pretty much spend it on what you like. And my question, quite an honest one, is when we're $1.3 million surplus, and then we're allocating it to things we may or may not do, like body-worn cameras, I just wonder about the appropriateness of the process, or how we can determine what's the right amount to fund the police.
Absolutely, and for that reason, do we need them today? No. We can do without them and get them eventually in the future. So these are not stuff that our sky is going to fall if we don't get them, but at some point we are going to need them, so we just have to look at the future as well. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you again, gentlemen, for all the information you provided and the questions that you're taking. Just a question: when I go through the report on the possible reductions, one of the slides is on a police service comparison, and this was triggered by a question or an answer to Councillor Kaufman about, or Councillor Croson about certain forces doing less or doing more with less. Of the comparators that you have chosen to show that we're 2 to 6 officers lighter than communities of similar size, Red Deer, Brantford, Delta, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, which of those are municipal forces and which of those are RCMP?
Red Deer is RCMP.
Yeah.
Brantford is City Police, Delta is City Police, and Medicine Hat is City Police. So the only RCMP police jurisdiction is Red Deer.
Okay, so thank you. And now when you say authorized strength, it sounded to me like in your answer to either Councillor Croson or Kaufman that authorized strength doesn't always mean what's actually happening. You said that you just don't backfill positions. So are we confident that these are correct figures? These are actual officers that they have on duty on the payroll?
Well, these are the officers. They have that's the strength of their police department. Is every chair filled that they have budgeted for? I'm not. I don't know that answer. If I was a betting man, I would say no. Same as Lethbridge. We have 172 authorized people, but do you have 172 people working every day? The answer is no. So I would say same goes for those departments. And sometimes again, the numbers are dictated on many different things, mat, pat, sick leave, all those other components. And also sometimes running vacancies, as I mentioned, on purpose, just to balance a budget, because that's the quickest way to meet your budget deadline, is not to have people working and saving salary dollars.
And thank you for that. I'm just one quick question, hopefully. You were talking about the PAC team and how we could add another position, but I think you said Alberta Health would say we don't have the funding to do that. Was there ever any consideration we're saying, well, we'll give 2 positions, one of us, and we'll fund one of yours, and would that create any capacity for the other officers?
I haven't put that on the table, because really that means more pressure to the city. And again, that's something that's going to be subject to discussion, is Lethbridge City is funding Alberta Health for the services they need to deliver. But that's a separate discussion. I'm certainly open to that idea. But what I'm talking about is, if we have these programs working more often on a more regular basis, another example I gave, I can share with you, is part of the discussions had to do with if our officer is off work or their employees off work, that unit is not even working. So I've even made it very clear, if our officer is off for whatever reason, I'm willing to backfill the position with someone to make sure that team continues going every time they're scheduled to work, and have a more proactive approach on doing the service. And all the commitment I wanted from them is, can you backfill your position if your employee is away? And I still haven't got that. So it's all about, we're trying to different ways to hopefully bring more focus to these programs and show their true impact on the community. Because from my perspective, if something is designed to do certain things, but you're only doing it a few days here, a few days there, are we actually seeing the true impact to what this team can really do and moving forward? So those discussions are going on, but again, if there is the appetite from that perspective, certainly I'm game, because that program does work. It's been in effect in many different communities in Canada, and it's shown its worth already. I don't believe we even need to do a pilot on that.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. And I'm heartened to hear that you are open to and are considering a lot of different options. So thank you for that.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you very much, Mr. Chairman of the Police Commission, as well as our Police Chief, for answering our questions. My question is, first of all, is more of a comment. At our last joint school board committee meeting, that being the separate public school district as well as city council representation, that being Councillor Morrow and myself, there was a huge compliment in that there was more police resource officers in the schools. And so I want to say thank you for that. Now, was there increased funding to that, or was that just a reallocation of resources?
I don't believe the comments they made had to do with more people doing the job. It's just the positions were filled. So the positions always existed, but not necessarily always somebody working in those roles. But now I believe we have filled all those vacancies, and people are working in all the positions that were actually created to do the job.
Okay, well, anyway, it's appreciated, and thank you for that good news. My second question is, and maybe I don't know if yourself can answer this or Cameron. In the last, of course, like Councillor Kaufman stated earlier, we can't tell you how to spend the money. All we can do is allocate the money. But quite often, there's a trust in that when we give you money, it's given for certain things that were requested in the last budget cycle. Was there anything that was given to you in the last budget cycle that was asked for that has not been spent to date for a certain project? So have the projects or plans or programs been delivered, or is there something that hasn't been delivered which council gave you extra money for?
So, Councillor Parker, Simon, I can answer that. The last money that was given for specific projects were the Pack the Watch and the CPOs. And I think it's probably true to say, as Cameron alluded to earlier on, that money has been ring-fenced in the accounting records of the police service, and they are dealt with separately. So if there is a surplus on any one of those, and there has been certainly on the CPO, that surplus is disclosed separately. It's not put into the general police kitty.
And I believe that was discussed when we opened up the police budget almost at the halfway point of the term. And so was there anything at the prior budget in the 2000? Oh, actually, no, I think I'm going back a budget cycle before. Okay, that answers my question. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, sir.
Acting Mayor Hagan.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to go back to a little bit to staffing costs and how that covers over 80% of that budget. And that includes obviously overtime. Do we have historically over the years what the percentage of overtime has been and how it changes over the years? Do we have the last few years, for example? I don't know if Carmen could maybe be able to share that.
I just quickly looked at Comron. I don't believe there's been a significant increase in overtime, but overtime is a component that we have to cover shifts, etc. And but I don't believe we are seeing significant increase. But even on that, again, we're just looking at some other options, how we can even. There's always ways to be more efficient on that, so we don't use overtime. So there's going to be discussions on that, how we can even save money on that front. But I don't believe there's been a trend that we're seeing significant increase on that front.
Okay, because I look back into other communities and per capita what the policing services are and the individuals that are required. And some of the paperwork we received show that we have actually less officers than what should be allocated to a community our size. And so the reason I asked about the overtime costs is I'm wondering if a lot of that overtime or a percentage of that overtime comes because we're actually short-staffed on more of a regular basis and can't backfill some of the sicknesses, etc. Could you speak to that?
Absolutely. You're right. The only way to minimize overtime is to have more people based on the authorized strength is so we can backfill positions when people are sick, etc. But that comes at a cost, and we need to really look at that, how much overtime we're spending, and if that money was to actually be spent to hire more people, to reduce, can we have actually more people without going over the budget? That way we can actually put divert some of the overtime money into resources we have. It's a good formula for sure, because again, when people work overtime, it's not just somebody working overtime. They're working on their days off that they need to rest to get ready for their next set of shifts. And every time you bring people working overtime, you're cutting into their basically personal time and the time they need to recharge and come back to work with a full mind. So too much overtime is to me is a red flag that we need to watch for, especially on certain employees if they're doing too much, because where is the work-life balance for them and how's their mental health, and can they continue doing that without getting sick themselves in the near future? So it does make sense, but the only way to, like if we have 172, but say we had 185 people, but that would reduce the overtime or no overtime, then can we go to that concept to have zero overtime but more people? I don't know if that's possible, but that's certainly a good discussion to have.
Yes, I totally thank you for that answer, because I totally understand that there's going to be overtime. That happens within any business or any business unit within the corporation. Now, I was just thinking that the possibility of, from a resolution that I brought forward here a few months back, that we could have more officers for a similar pay if that overtime expense was decreased, because of course it's time and a half or double time. And so thank you for that answer. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And Chief, I think one of the things to consider about overtime is that it's not just bodies, it's time. Because police officers can't clock out when their shift's over. And that's probably as much of an accumulation of overtime as lack of people. Because if you have an incident that your officer's reporting to at half an hour before they're supposed to clock out, and now they're 5 hours into the next shift because they're dealing with an incident, that has to consume a great deal of the overtime, not just the fact they have less bodies. Is that correct?
For sure, because there are cases that the overtime is spent because into an investigation, they can't just hand it off and just punch the clock and go home.
Right.
So they're stuck staying around for longer. But again, those come in certain times. But I think a lot of the overtime that we spend has to do with calling people in because we are short on a patrol team. We need to have certain numbers for the safety of our officers, that we need to actually backfill people coming in on overtime. But again, there are other ways to manage that as well, which I'll be talking with the executives and the commission down the road to see if we can actually manage that better as well. So.
Great, thank you. Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just one last question. In all the reductions, I don't see anything targeted at things like fleet or equipment. In other areas of the corporation, we're looking at ways to push off replacements, to push off buying the new shiny thing till a little bit later. Was that talked about at all, or is that looked at all? Is that a possibility?
Absolutely. Just to quantify that, Lethbridge Police has great equipment, but we don't have any shiny things. But the whole crux of that is this: those costs, we can certainly mile vehicles more, or hold them longer. Those are certainly something that we can look at. We can even have our officers walk more versus driving, just to reduce costs on fuel. There's certainly, but those are going to be, if you're trying to save thousands, they're going to give you pennies in savings. So really, there are not really certain things that we can say if you decrease the amount by, say, a couple of $100,000 in a few years based on those. But again, I can share with you, when we look at fleet, that's a good thing, because it was tried in my last organization at one point. We were miling vehicles more, but we soon realized that by doing that, we were actually spending more money on repairs versus actually getting newer vehicles that had warranty, etc. So in the short term, they gave us some savings, but in the long term, they actually cost us more money. So we kind of stopped that, and we reverted back to where we were doing before. So these are all good initiatives that I believe they've been tried before, but can we still look at them? Absolutely. But again, as I said, they're going to give you pennies in savings when you're trying to save thousands.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, and there are no more questions. So I thank you very much, and Finance Committee will be having a discussion about the police requests later on this week. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Item 4.6, Public Library, Tara Plato.
Okay, good morning. Good morning, Your Worship, Mayor Spearman, and members of council. My name is Alan Quinton. I'm the chair of the Lethbridge Public Library Board. Thank you for the time to come today to present our initiatives on our budget reduction. In the past 2 years, the library has streamlined expenses in order to fund additional full-time security at the main branch, in addition to planning for a replacement of revenue in order to maintain the free memberships. As a result, any additional cost savings must be in the form of service reductions. The board is responsible for the management and control of the library, and service level decisions are made by the board based on community needs and available budget, which is why the initiatives are being presented today in priority order. First priorities are those initiatives that would have the least negative impact on the community, customers, staffing, and operations. The budget reduction initiatives are put forward, were recommended by management and reviewed and revised by the board's financial committee, and then subsequently were brought to the whole board for review, revision, and approval. The board took the approach of trying to find relatively significant cost savings without drastic impact to the community. Reduction in hours of operations generally seemed to be the best approach, as it realized the biggest cost savings while ensuring that no particular demographic or user group is disproportionately impacted by the changes. We are asking that small incremental changes are preferred in order to minimize negative impact. Cumulatively, the options being presented will add up to anywhere between 2 and 10% in reduction of expenses. So now I'll turn it over to our CEO, Tara Plato, and she will give you some additional details.
I'm on. So as Alan said, our goal was to introduce several small changes to services that would not be overly disruptive to our customers and community. Most importantly, they will not have a disproportionate impact on any one particular segment of the population, but could still achieve the cost savings that council might be looking for. Approximately 65% of the library's budget goes towards staffing, and actually if you take out the uncontrollable portion of our budget, it's closer to 80%. About 90% of those are public facing. So what that means is a reduction in staffing must equal a reduction in services. Other major budget expenses for the library include the Chinook Arch membership fee, which is presented and approved by council, our book and resource budget, and our technology budget. Next slide, please, Ryan. So 6 priorities have been recommended to council from the library board in priority order that add up anywhere from 2 to 10%. The first 2 options combined total just about 5%, and the final 4 would get us to 10%. As contained in your initiative sheets, each option has different impacts on potential usage of the library and current revenue streams, which is why they're presented separately. Final implementation of the initiatives may vary slightly from what has been presented based on additional insight into how the library is currently being used by the community. All the data included on your initiative sheets is based on the 2019 operational year, but we may be seeing long-term usage trends change during and after the pandemic that will be taken into consideration when implementing final decisions. Of course, it's difficult for us to predict exactly how the changes will impact usage of services, but in general, all proposed reductions would likely mean an overall reduction in visitation to the library and general library usage. It's hard to predict whether people will be able to shift their behavior and visit at other times. Some will, and of course others won't be able to. Next slide, please. I just want to talk a little bit about what we learned in 2020 because this was taken into account in our decision making. We were forced to close for about 3.5 months this year. When we initially reopened, we did not have evening hours for the first bit as we really relearned how to provide services in a very different way. We tested new ways of providing service, and we also had to work on bringing staffing back who had been laid off during that time, trying to schedule in cohorts and all of those different things that went into reopening safely. The community clearly told us at that time that evening hours are required for those who can't make it to the library during the day. And we also did not initially reopen on Sundays, and we learned that those weekend hours too are very important to our community. We also learned that our spaces and our in-person connections are essential to our community. More than just a place to get a book or movie, many people rely on the library as a safe place to be and to connect to community and each other. We had many customers throughout our closure tell us how important the library and our spaces are to them. We learned that additional investment in online resources is and was important during our closure, but we also learned it is not a replacement for physical materials. Online resources serve only a portion of the population and exclude those without internet access, mobile devices, or the skills and ability to access material online. And lastly, we learned that the library provides essential public computer access to find government health and community supports and to connect to friends, family, and opportunities, especially during this pandemic. Next slide, please. We know that our community, province, and country are in a state of crisis right now as we endure the ongoing pandemic and look towards a lengthy period of recovery. The public library is essential to this recovery effort to assist those who are job seeking, those looking to enhance or learn new skills, those looking to connect with community, government, and social service agencies, those new to Canada, in supporting students and home learners who may not have school environments right now, in providing leisure and recreational opportunities to support community mental health and to contribute to civic pride, and to help decrease social isolation. Next slide, please. Seeing our significant role in recovery, again, we approach these decisions with our mission statement in mind. We hope to minimize the impact on our community and their access to library services and resources, and to ensure that we are not putting up barriers to those who need us most right now. These recommendations ensure we maintain evening and weekend options for accessing the library, as well as a full slate of services while achieving the financial goals of Council. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Quinton and Ms. Plato. Question, and sorry, I need to flip back to my budget book. Just help me with, and I really appreciate the work that the staff and the board have done to bring these in front of council, and with the mindset on the least impact to our community as possible. If I look at your priority one is the hours of operation, opening and evening hours. Can you explain a little to me? Because in the proposed implementation strategy, it talks about option 1 and option 2. And are those both being contemplated in this? Or is that just odd wording to me? Or is it phase 1, phase 2?
Yeah, they're both being implemented. My apologies. The way we had to break them down because each option, again, impacts our revenue and our services differently. So the first part of this priority is opening a little bit later in the mornings, and the second part is closing earlier in the evenings, but the proposal is to do both. It's just to break down the different impacts that those have.
Okay, thank you for that, because that I just didn't understand if both options were in there, but they are. Thank you for that. In priority 2, closed 2 evenings per week. Again, I think I had the same note, the option 1, option 2. So I think you've answered my question. Thank you.
Good thing he answered his own question for you. I have a question regarding your hours. What are your current hours of operation? Do you remember? I'm looking.
So today we are open slightly different hours than we would normally be because of the pandemic and requirements to do greater cleaning and that sort of thing. So right now we are open 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. 4 days a week, and then 10 to 5 on Friday and Saturdays, and then 12 to 5 on Sundays, I believe. Those are slightly less than what our normal operating hours would be and what we're budgeted for, again, just due to greater needs in regards to making sure that the spaces are cleaned properly and that sort of thing.
It's slightly less than you have proposed here.
Yes, that's correct. By 1 hour, in the first option, it's slightly less than option number 1.
Is that sustainable moving forward, these hours?
So again, anytime that we reduce hours, we're reducing access to the community. That was implemented again as a protocol as part of the pandemic. It wasn't intended to be long-term, but obviously those decisions have to be made based on what council's decisions are. What we are proposing, so if you look at option 1 and option 2 put together, that actually would add up to a little bit increased closed hours than we are now. But what we'll do is really look at how we can make the hours work so that we can continue with programming and that sort of thing. The other thing is we're not doing any programming, very limited room bookings right now. So the need in the evening right now isn't as great because we aren't providing full services in the midst of the pandemic. So once we are able to, then we would look at how we would adjust those hours given on our budget. So as you can see from priority 2, we might choose to close 1 or 2 evenings a week. We would have to decide exactly how that would be implemented based on, again, what's best for the community.
Okay. And you're asking Finance Committee to look at the entirety of that package, all of 6 priorities that you rolled up, that would equal a 10% cut. Is that correct?
Yes. So I know the ask was to provide what a 5 or 10% cut would look like. Again, trying to take those directions with having the least impact on the community. We've put together several small things. So yes, the first 2 would equal 5%, the rest would equal 10.
Great, thank you. We have no more questions. So thank you. We will be discussing this more later this week.
Deputy Mayor, sorry, Councillor Kaufman.
Councillor Kaufman, go ahead.
Yeah, no. I know the hand doesn't show up on the screen that clearly. So yes, I did have a question.
I have to turn around, sorry.
Sorry to make you work, Deputy Mayor. Thank you both for the presentation, for the information. Ms. Plato, if council were to look at at either option, there is identified a reduction in FTE or part-time. Are these actual reduction of staff, or are these reduction of hours and the workload on staff?
It would be hours only. About 60% of our staff are casual, which means that we can reduce hours without reducing the staffing. So everything up until priority 6 includes only non-permanent FTE.
Thank you. So when we see a funding reduction, we're seeing a reduction in the wage then?
It's a reduction in the amount of hours that our casual staff would receive.
Which would be a reduction in wage?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. And now there are no more questions. So thank you very much. Next item is the Galt Museum and Archives, Mr. Martins.
Oki, and good morning, Mr. Chairman, Your Worship, and councillors. Thank you for this opportunity to address council on this very important topic, the 2021 and 2022 City of Lethbridge allocation to the Galt Museum and Archives. Unfortunately, Chairman Mensch was unable to stay and present alongside myself and Mel Mofu. So, slide number 2. Lethbridge City Council has been very supportive of the Galt Museum and Archives since the 1950s. Our 7-decade relationship is based on mutual respect, alignment of goals, and the desire to provide reliable, quality public service to the citizens of Lethbridge. Our successes are your successes. Our challenges are your challenges. We are part of an extraordinary extended family. Together, we strive to build a better community. COVID-19 has challenged us not only as a public service organization, but also as a community. We have had to look at our complement of programs and rethink how to develop and deliver quality community engagements safely and effectively. This includes exhibitions, public and school programs, excuse me, special events, research activities, and volunteer services. Our community is scared of this virus, and they should be. The past 8 months have not been easy. We know that this has not been easy for other cultural institutions, as well as the delivery of City of Lethbridge services. Difficult decisions have to be made in order to preserve the integrity of core services. Council requested data related to 2 potential funding reduction scenarios, 5% and 10% for fiscal 2021 and 2022. We complied, and before you on page A67 and A68 are the results of our research, our discussions, deliberations with the board, and our conclusions. We are a lean organization that is extremely pragmatic when it comes to investments in our services and the opportunities that we provide to our community. The narrative before you chronicles how we would implement each of those reductions and the service level impacts that they would have. The Kpmg Phase 2 report provided the Galt with 4 opportunities: to examine and to rethink fund development, temporary exhibitions and hours of operation, KPIs, or key performance indicators, and governance. The board and staff take this report very seriously, and as such have developed, as requested, project charters that reveal how we plan to move forward and address Kpmg's recommendations. You should have received an update on our progress earlier today, or perhaps later today, about the status of our project. These are an integral part of how the Galt plans to move forward in the coming years. Your participation is integral to the institution's success. Earlier this year, the Galt Museum and Archives was before you in order to showcase what and how we have contributed to the development of Lethbridge and the surrounding community. Our 2019 annual report, combined with the stakeholder survey results, demonstrate an institution that is connected to the community, relevant, involved, and providing solid, meaningful, and timely engagements. Should Council like to review those documents again, we would be happy to provide electronic copies to each of you. We, as an organization, continue to grow and expand intellectually, socially, and culturally, and would like to continue with that important work at current service levels. Volunteerism is a key indication of our success, and that is valued at approximately $250,000 a year. On the screen before you are just a few examples of the feedback that we have received from community members this year. It is true that visitation and on-site participation has dropped during the COVID period. At the museum, reductions have been significant, around 85%. At Fort Whoop-Up, we have fared far better with reduced physical visitation down by approximately 50%. Our experience is not a unique experience. In fact, it is typical of museums across Canada, both in large urban areas and small community museums. At the same time, we have witnessed significant increases in our YouTube channel visits, Facebook Live events, as well as Instagram and Twitter account engagement, up on average 8% from 2019 levels. By the end of 2020, we estimate interacting with over 100,000 people. Being online, for us, is the place to be during a global pandemic, and we are rising to that challenge. investing in the infrastructure to provide integrated virtual and online participation continues to be a priority for the museum, along with outdoor engagement experiences. Our community feels safer participating in programs that are outside. We recognize that and continue to adjust our programming accordingly. As we pivot once again and look towards 2021 and 2022, we have decided to focus on our digital footprint and the opportunities that social media and the web provide. They are at the forefront of our engagement strategy for the communities that we serve near and far. In-person engagements will be kept to a minimum, and when they do, they will adhere to the latest AHS safety protocols. This virus will not prevent us from reaching and engaging our community. New acquisitions to our collections underscore that reality. Donations to the museum collection and the archive collection continue to grow along with the oral histories that accompany each donation. Collections, in our experience, appear to be COVID resistant. The relationship that we have built with community members over the years continue to deepen. We are a trusted friend to many. At the Galt Museum and Archives, tradition and innovation intersect to create memorable experiences that last a lifetime. Our mission, quote, to inspire our communities to engage in the human history of Southern Alberta together, preserving and sharing collections and stories, end quote. This sets the course for the organization now and into the future. We, like Council, value excellence, responsible stewardship, integrity, inclusivity, creativity, and innovation. We may use the words and phrases in different ways. However, our goal is the same: to build an inclusive, vibrant community as evident in Council's vision. That vision is to continue to work together to ensure that Lethbridge demonstrate active leadership in environmental stewardship and innovation, and recognized to be a safe, healthy, vibrant, prosperous, economically viable place where all people can fully participate in community life. Council has some very difficult decisions to make, and we recognize that. The Galt Museum and Archives represents less than a full percentage of the city's expenditures. We are a small, yet potent component of services that the community trusts and relies on. Given the strong community impact that the Galt has on the citizenry of Lethbridge and its ongoing development and evolution in light of COVID-19, as well as the Kpmg report, we respectfully request that Council consider freezing the Galt's budget at current levels for fiscal 2021 and 2022. This freeze would allow the institution to work through its current COVID development plan, the Kpmg implementation strategy, do important strategic planning, and work with Council and the community to create a more vibrant and inclusive institution. On behalf of Chairman Mensch, the board, and all the staff, thank you for your time and attention. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Martins. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Martins, for the presentation and the initiatives you've put in front of us. If I can ask about A67, it sees a net savings to taxes of $95,000. Is that would be about 5%, correct, of the Galt's budget?
That is correct. That is correct, Councillor. That's 5%.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then when I read further, it looks like a 20% cut in hours. am I reading that from 52 to 43, or which is
That is from 53 hours per week down to 42 hours per week.
so that's a 20% reduction. Is that, am my math on?
I believe so. Yes, that's correct.
Because most of our city facilities, the bulk of the costs are wages, so staff hours. So I'm wondering how a 20% reduction in that translates only into a 5% reduction. Can you help me out with that?
The 20% reduction equates to a 1.0 FTE. Reduction in non-permanent staff, and that $95,000 equates to a number of other reductions in other areas, including time at the opening time at the fort, and other and fewer weeks of service as well.
Thank you. No, I get that. It just doesn't seem, it seems counterintuitive to me that if a reduction in operating hours is 20%, it should be a much larger decrease to costs. But maybe I'll have to do some more thinking on that. The other question I had, the revenue reduction. Sorry, thank you.
Councillor, our Mel Mofu can add some more detail to this that number.
Good morning, Councillor. Thank you for your question. So the 20% reduction in service hours is not directly proportional to the dollar amount that is a 5% cut. So in there, reduction in the number of hours at the museum, and also the number of weeks that will be open at Fort Whoopop, that's reducing that as well by another 20%. Again, like I said, not directly proportional. Included in the 5% reduction is some of the summer hiring stuff that we have done in the past to boost our program and our visitations. So those are also included in that 5% reduction of $95,000. I hope that clears your...
It just, as I said, it just seems counterintuitive because I hear that most of our costs are in staff. If you're reducing the time you're actually open to the public by 20%, I thought we'd see a much greater savings. So I'll maybe just have to review that myself.
Okay, no, we won't, because our casual staff are working, say, 2 hours a day, and also on the weekends. And we plan to move our visitor service coordinators who work at the front desk full-time, not to work from Monday to Friday, but to work one day in the weekend. So, I mean, like I said, again, reduction in service hours cannot be directly proportional to the dollar amount in terms of percentages.
No, I get that. I thought they would be closer. I didn't think they'd be exact. Next question I had on the revenue decrease that you're projecting. What is that based on? Is it paid admissions, or is it based on fewer admission dollars, based on a reduction of times, or is it based on COVID impacts?
We are basing our potential new future of 5% based on a reduction in admissions, as well as the sales of memberships to both of the institutions, Fort Whoopop as well as the Galt Museum. And we are basing those calculations on the experiences that we are facing in COVID-19.
All right, so I'm assuming those are very conservative estimates, and hopefully that won't materialize. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
No more questions. So thank you very much for your presentation today, and we will be discussing this later this week.
Thank you very much.
Our next presentation is, or do you want to break for lunch? Let's have one more. Let's do one. Allied Arts Council. Yeah. So let's do 4.8, and we'll get Ms. Lynn with the Allied Arts Council presentation, since she's been waiting so patiently.
Thank you. And good morning. I'm not sure if I know how to work this machine. You're gonna, I'll just do this when I'm ready for the next slide. Okay, here we go. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to request a continuation of a portion of the one-time funding the Allied Arts Council received from the City of Lethbridge in 2019 and 2020. This funding allowed us to continue to support arts organizations while providing exceptional and affordable arts programming for our community. We truly appreciate the financial challenges that City Council is facing as they review the city budget, and we really truly also value your willingness to consider our request. A bit of background. During the 2019-2022 budget deliberations, the AAC requested a significant increase in funding from the city. This increase was based on identified budget pressures and our experiences during the first 5 years of CASA operations. We were experiencing workload pressures at CASA due to the success of the facility programs. And we were hoping to address a 30% wage disparity within or when compared to employment market, which was affecting our ability to attract and retain employees. And we also needed to address increasing operational costs, including an anticipated increase in insurance costs associated with CASA operations. Our funding request, much like this one, was untimely, occurring during a time of budget constraint. Although our complete request could not be accommodated at that time, we were pleased to receive additional funds to address the workload pressures at CASA, and we were also grateful to receive one-time funding allocation of $107,000 in 2019 and again in 2020. The AAC believes in budgeting for long-term sustainability, and we were cautious with the expenditures of this one-time funding. The board made a decision to distribute the one-time funding across the 4-year budget cycle. The additional monies have been used to begin to address the workload pressures and the wage disparity issue, as well as to offset the normal increase in operating costs such as rent, utilities, professional costs, and software licensing. In mid-March 2020, the world was disrupted by COVID-19, and operations as we knew and planned for ceased to exist. The AAC responded to COVID-19 by laying off approximately 50% of our staff, which resulted in a savings of approximately $105,000. We repurposed budget allocations to pivot to free virtual programming and to allow remaining staff and members to go home to work. And we also mitigated revenue loss through an application to various COVID support programs, including CEWS. Although the AAC is projecting a loss of approximately $284,000 in earned revenues against budget, our mitigating strategies have served us well, and we are actually projecting a surplus this fiscal year. Unfortunately, we are still living with much uncertainty, and the financial pitch for 2021 and 2022 looks less promising. We are pleased that queues will continue, but we are uncertain to the structure of the program. Our programming has recommenced, but with severe restriction on participant numbers. We are also uncertain as to the capacity of our normal donors and sponsors, and we are not confident in our ability to access grants that we normally get, such as our AFA grant for the gallery program. At this point, we are projecting significant deficits in 2021 and 2022, as outlined on the chart on the screen. This uncertainty is why the AAC is requesting continued one-time funding. It is our intention to use our 2020 surplus to help offset the anticipated budget shortfall in 2021 and 2022. However, even with that redistribution, we are still projecting a deficit. We are requesting city's assistance with the deficit. We realize that these are challenging times for everyone and hard decisions will need to be made. We believe, however, our request will ensure we are able to continue to provide strong, accessible programming for the community and will also ensure our sustainability through these uncertain times. Thank you for your consideration, and if there are any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Sorry, I pushed the wrong button there. Thank you, Ms. Lint, for the presentation and all the information provided. Also, the work that you and your staff have been doing during this challenging time to keep people active and engaged. A question: Have your staff or your board done any budgeting in case, or any budget scenarios in case council did task you with a 5% reduction?
You know, at this point, we haven't. We are a resilient organization. We budget to what we know that we can count on. And so if we are asked to do the 5% reduction, we'll then sit down, sharpen our pencils, and sort out where that will happen. We are committed to being accessible to the community, so there is only a moderate amount of revenue generation that we're able to do. We have, over a 20-year period, built up reserves that could be looked at, but ultimately there's only two options when you're budgeting. You either are going to increase your revenue, which we will not be able to do in the foreseeable future given COVID restrictions, or you reduce services.
Thank you for that. And that was my follow-up question. You're different in the other groups we've had in front of us today. You operate as a fee-for-service. You're not sort of a contained in the city department. The fee-for-service agreement that we have with Allied Arts Council, if we did task you with a reduction, which would likely, as we've heard from every other group so far, meaning shortening hours, fewer services, would that mean reopening and renegotiating that fee for service? Because I'm sure we have some requirements in there.
Yeah, there are certain expectations that come from council and from the city. We actually work with two fee-for-services, one for leadership, which is the work we do around supporting artists and arts organizations, as well as the fee-for-service for operating CASA. The leadership agreement, there's certain expectations. If we reduce services there, we won't hit our KPIs. One of our KPIs has traditionally been a balanced budget. That one's pretty much off the table as we speak, going through COVID. CASA is a little more complicated in that it's a agreement, in a sense. The city holds an agreement with the university, which obligates the Allied Arts Council to provide a certain level of service to the university within the building. So it complicates things a little bit. So I think there would have to be some discussions on what the outcomes or what the expectation of council is.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Lint. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Linton, for the presentation. I recognize the amount of work that's required to put these together to come to City Council, so thank you for that. You just mentioned the Allied Arts Council has a reserve. I'm looking at your statement of financial position. Is that the $42,000 under unrestricted in your net assets?
I don't have the financial statement in front of me. What is the number that's listed there?
Under net assets, you have invested in capital assets at $62,000, unrestricted $42,000, and internally restricted at $640,000. So I'm just wondering if you said you've got you have a reserve.
Yes.
I'm just wondering if the unrestricted is that $42,000.
Yeah, well, the total amount actually, the unrestricted, the board has discretion around how that money is used. The restricted amounts need to be used within the departments that they're at. So the board would have to go into those restricted reserves and make decisions on how they're going to spend those money. So in reality, there is a total reserve of the total amount. I would say that money was built up over 20 years to ensure that there is long-term viability and sustainability for the organization. So if we are starting to draw them down at a rapid rate to address a large deficit, they will eventually go away, and so will our financial stability.
So thank you. So you're addressing more of the 640,000 of the internally restricted as opposed to the 42,000 of unrestricted.
Yes.
So thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. And we have no more questions. So thank you, Ms. Lind, for your presentation, and we will deliberate more on this later this week.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's time for lunch. What time should we come back at? An hour, okay. So I'd like us to recess till 1:05. Finance needs some time to do some work, so we will reconvene at 1:05. Thank you.
Thank you. See you all soon.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to reconvene Finance Committee for today. I'd like to ask the city clerk to do a roll call, please.
Councillor Kaufman.
Present.
Councillor Morrow.
Yeah.
Councillor Parker.
Here.
Acting Mayor Higgin.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Miyashiro.
Here.
Mayor Spearman. Councillor Campbell.
Present.
Councillor Carlson.
Present and accounted for.
Councillor Kaufman. Okay,
Yes, present.
good. Just Mayor Spearman right now.
Did you hear that, Madam Clerk?
Yes, I got it. Thank you.
Okay, we were having audio problems earlier, so thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Our first presentation this afternoon will be from the Southern Alberta Art Gallery.
Ready when you are? Okay. Good afternoon, Oki, Your Worship, Mayor Spearman, and City of Lethbridge councillors, members of the Finance Committee. My name is Christy Trinier, the Executive Director of the Southern Alberta Art Gallery, and I'm here to present along with Lexi Penzik, our Communications Manager. Our board chairs, Melissa Arsenek and Mark McMurray, shared a letter with the Mayor and Council this morning, and their regrets that they cannot be here in person due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you to the City Administration for all your support in our presentation today. And first slide, next one, next slide. The SEG is a contemporary art gallery presenting dynamic exhibitions and creative programs in our community of Southern Alberta for 44 years. The SEG was honored to receive a Blackfoot name, Mansiksakaitsatapisa Nixon, on October 23rd from elders Bruce Wolfchild and Mary Fox. Mansiksakaitsatapisa Nixon is the new making of images related to the telling of our Blackfoot people's stories. The SAG is looking forward as we prepare to celebrate the upcoming 100-year anniversary of the Carnegie Library, which you can see on the left side of our gallery, on January 23rd, 2022. The history of the library is an important part of the ways in which we share and exchange knowledge in our gallery. Next slide. Contemporary art is the art of our time, and the SAG fosters the work of contemporary artists who challenge boundaries and helps us to see the world in a new way. We are proud to share the creativity of artists locally, nationally, and internationally. As a relevant and vibrant gallery, we know our community enjoys to see the top quality art and to be a part of that energy. Next slide. Here you can see an image of Mary Kavanagh's exhibition, Daughters of Uranium, which was presented in 2019. She has a studio and practices here in Lethbridge, and she also is a professor at the University of Lethbridge. This exhibition, produced at the SAG, traveled to both Calgary and Ontario after it was launched in our community. Next slide. Thank you. Sandra Meigs was a part of both iterations of the SAG's McIntyre Ranch projects, where artists met to create new work at a working ranch environment, exploring the landscapes of our region. And this exhibition presented over 20 years of paintings that Sandra has made in the Southern Alberta Grasslands region. Next slide. Kapwani Kawanga, an artist from Ontario who's based in Paris, won Canada's $100,000 art prize in 2018. And then presented a site-specific artwork at the SAG, moving soil from outside the gallery into our upper gallery and inviting visitors to repatriate it back to the earth, bucket by bucket. Next slide. It takes a bit of time. And you can skip ahead to the one after that. Okay, thank you. Faye Heavyshield, a Kainai Blood Tribe member, is one of Canada's most notable living Indigenous artists. She presented her exhibition Clan at the SAG this spring and a public artwork, A River is a River, but It's Never the Same, on the windows of the SAG, featuring large-scale photographs of all three rivers which flow through Kainai territory and sustain us all. And in this image, you'll see Santiago Mostyn's artwork, which was presented this spring relating to the Amber Valley settlers that arrived in Alberta from Tulsa, Oklahoma at the turn of the century, narrowly missing the Tulsa race riots. And these were Alberta's first Black settlers. His artwork connects with our diverse community and brought about many important conversations. Next slide. Your support over the past 2 years has enabled us to offer dynamic exhibitions and education programs in our community. This includes free gallery tours each weekend, summer camps for kids, youth art programs, and unique adult public engagement programs, including beading and drum making workshops in our Conversations in Blackfoot series, SAG Cinema films made by Indigenous filmmakers, such as Fast Horse, a documentary of Blackfoot horse racers, and partnership art events like the Deep Dark and interactive Into the Streets SAG public art project produced by Caitlin R.C. Brown and Wayne Garrett. Next slide. Gallery exhibitions are animated by lively public engagement, which extends conversations about art and culture and provides important access to the community. Next slide. That's right. This year, the pandemic resulted in a 3-month closure at the SAG, an unprecedented gallery closure, a decrease in attendance due to safety precautions, and a major impact on our ability to host our traditional signature fundraisers that feature large gatherings, such as Art Frenzy, Art Auction, Craft Beer Festival, and our gallery opening celebrations. We have also had large challenges since 2019 with an increase of serious incidents that have impacted our programming and our staff due to proximity to the incidents occurring in Galt Gardens and as a result of the impacts of the opioid crisis. We additionally had closures to the gallery of a week and decreased gallery access due to the 3rd Avenue construction project from August to November 19th. Next slide. We have had to pivot quickly to address all of these challenges to the best of our abilities, and I'm proud to say that our first virtual art auction this Saturday night was a true art frenzy of community support and demonstrated excitement to connect through the SAG. And last slide. The SAG respectfully requests a continuation of our special scope funding that we received in 2019 and 2020 through 2021 and 2022 to support our gallery services and programming, and to ensure we can provide dynamic, high quality, and safe gallery exhibition experiences for our community. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and I'm now happy to answer any questions you might have in relation to our request.
Councillor, well, thank you very much. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Trinier, and I'm not sure who else was joining you. Was it Ms. Penzick?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
hello.
Thank you both for the information and the presentation. So a question, your final slide asked for the continuation. Was that I'm just trying to recall, that was the 76,000?
Yes, Councillor Carlson, it's $76,000 per year for 2021 and 2022 operating budgets. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, in your financials, when it talks about the City of Lethbridge in revenues, it talks about City of Lethbridge grants. In 2019, it says $259,800.
Yes, sir.
Is that including? Is that including the 76 then?
It includes the special scope funding that we received in 2020, as well as our fee for service agreement, which is approximately $188,000 per year.
Okay, thank you. And the imputed rent and utilities, is that also, I guess, an in-kind from the city?
We're very lucky that we paid $25 a year for the rent of our gallery space from the city, and we do receive imputed utilities. We're very thankful for that.
Okay, thank you on that. One of the questions I had for the previous presenters, I'm going to pose it to all of our fee-for-service because we've tasked our internal business units and boards and commissions with this. If, hypothetically, you were tasked with a 5% reduction on what is currently being provided by the city, have you and your staff and your board had any discussions on how that would impact you?
Yes, and I again would have to state that in that instance, we would have to reduce some of our programming. That may include a reduction in exhibitions, public engagement programs for adults and youth. It may mean a decrease in the free admission we provide by donation on Sundays and Thursday evenings, and it could result in a reduction of our hours. We've found that we need to have at least 2 to 3 staff on site to have the gallery safely open to the public due to the changing circumstances of the downtown in the last year and a half.
Thank you. Now, further to that, pardon me, because in your financial statement you call it a grant from the city. Is it a true grant, or is it a fee for service we have with you?
For clarity, we just note it as grant because that relates to how we report to our funding agencies, but it is a fee for service agreement combined with a special scope funding allocation request and an imputed rent and utilities allocation. So for clarity, it's a fee for service agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought it was, and so if there was a reduction in the funding provided by the city, would your fee for service agreement need to be reopened and renegotiated?
The financial portion may need to be renegotiated, and the appendixes at the back, which define the services that we provide, may need to be addressed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have no more questions in the queue. Thank you very much for your presentations. We will be deliberating on this later this week. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
We're at item 4.10, Southern Alberta Ethnic Association. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Finance Committee of the City Council. My name is Victor Uto, and I'm the President and the Chair of the Southern Alberta Ethnic Association. And I'm here this afternoon with Jackie French, who is the Executive Director, to make a presentation on behalf of our association. The vision of the Southern Alberta Ethnic Association is to provide an equitable and welcoming community that recognizes and openly celebrates cultural diversity. And our mission statement is the SAE is a multicultural hub for inclusion and partnership, and we promote understanding and awareness and celebrate cultural diversity through community events and programs. Next slide. I will want to probably move to the next few slides before I come back to this. Next one. Next ones, please. That's okay, sir. That's all right, that's fine. Maybe it's, all right. So I think the next one will do. The most important slide on this I have is the question of why are we here today, all right? Now, when we moved from the old premises to the new multicultural center, it was apparent that the amount of money that was allocated for the multicultural center was inadequate. All right. So in 2017, my predecessor, Dr. Surya, appeared before council together with the executive director to make a case so that there was a correction to the fee-for-service budget allocated to our premises. And he made it clear that when we moved out, the amount of money that was allocated wasn't sufficient, it wasn't enough, And then when he made a presentation, the council accepted his presentation and then gave us enough money for that period. So my presence here this afternoon is to appeal to council, the finance committee, to continue the correction of the fee-for-service budget which was provided for 2020 and 2019-2020 to be continued to 2021 and 2022. Now, we'll go back a bit, sorry. Now, we definitely would have loved to ask for more money, but we all know that these are not normal times for any institution, and times are difficult. So we are just pleading with the council to just continue what was provided us in 2019-2020 for the 2021 and 2022 fiscal years. And then, yeah. So the Southern Alberta Ethnic Association has had an average of 30 different member groups and individuals in the past 2 years, which represents about 1,000 people from continents, from Asia, Europe, Africa, South and North America. And SAA has developed partnership with the Lethbridge Family Services, the Streets Alive, our members, and the Lethbridge Library. And we have provided the following programs for the past 2 years. We have the Newcomers event, Black History Month, Asian Heritage Festival, Heritage Day, Afrofest, and Christmas Around the World, Community Christmas Dinner. We've provided language classes, building cultural bridges, immigration workshops, cultural nights, and taste-off. And we provide an environment for people to come in there and celebrate their cultures and their traditions in a very conducive environment. So, now the utilization of the N77 funding, which took care of us from 2019 to 2020, I want to probably try a little bit to explain how that money was spent. We had to hire an executive director, 2 coordinators for our events, maintaining the building and our programs. We've freshly painted the ballrooms and the back offices. We've also added a few, the rustic barn door on ballroom and the small kitchen. We've repaired the partitionings, repaired a few things there. And we've also acquired a few things, the linen for tables, event bookings, and we are in the process of getting our website up and running so that it makes it easier for people to get to know what is happening at the center, and also through that they could, be involved in our activities. And we all know that the pandemic has been a challenge for everybody, and we haven't been left out of that as well. And it has drastically affected our programs, and we used to have a taste of where people come to the center to enjoy, listen to music, listen to people talk about their cultures, their traditions, and all that kind of thing. But this hasn't happened, and we had to quickly adjust to the situation on the ground. So some of those programs we offer virtually, and that is not exactly what we would have loved to do. But like I said, we are not in normal times, and we had to adjust our programs to do that. And the impact of the pandemic has been significant in loss of rentals as well, because we used to have people rent places there, but because of COVID, nothing is going on there. So we have lost some form of money through the rentals, and as well as being able to host members, we're not able to do that. We would have loved to, but it is what it is. And in order to reach revenue projections, SA will innovate events and programming to stay in line with the COVID safety measures. And also we want to make sure that we don't expose our members to unnecessary risks of the COVID. Now, with funding, SAEA, if we get the funding, we support all our strategic priorities and provide opportunities for inclusion in Lethbridge cultural life and increase public involvement in community events. And as the city grows, there's always the need for us to celebrate diversity. I mean, the SAEA, technically speaking, is like a replica of this beautiful country of ours called Canada. We're just a melting pot of all cultures where people come there. We create an environment for them to celebrate their cultures, their lifestyle, their traditions in a non-judgmental environment. And some of the programs we have embarked on have been so popular that, I mean, we recently started a program where teaching languages online, and you just couldn't imagine the response we got from our members and the city. People were so excited about it, and we believe that if we get the funding, continue to do this, become more involved in the community, and get people to appreciate other people. By learning about other people and learning about them, getting to know more of them, we believe that we're breaking the boundary and people get to respect each other, and we create an environment where diversity is celebrated and tolerated and becomes the theme for us in this city. So in summary, SAA is before Council today to request the continuation of Operation Budget New Initiative N77 at the specified amount for 2021 and 2022. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank you so much for your continued support of our activities. We are very grateful, and we thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reuter. What year again did you move into your new building, the new building?
2011.
Not long already. See, I lost time somewhere. The nature of the renovations that you've undertaken, did you get some grant dollars for that from provincial government or some other source?
For some of the funding, some of the improvements we did to the building, yes, we received some grant money. That's this year.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And you just shocked me that it's been 9 years as well. Holy moly, time does fly. Thank you, Dr. Wuthar, Ms. French, for the presentation, the information you did provide. I just need some clarity. I believe you're asking for continuation of the, but I believe previous years we gave 136,000, and I thought I saw in your presentation you're only asking for 77,000, which is a decrease in your ask of 60,000. Is that correct?
That is correct. The reason why we are asking for a decrease is because we had some surplus. And so there was a current period of time where there was no ED in place, as well as some staffing turnover and lack of staff. So we had a deficit. So we plan to use that deficit, that additional money surplus towards our funding for the next 2 years.
And to add to what she just said, I mean, there was a period of time we didn't have the executive director, and the board of directors had to take up the responsibility. I had to take off time from work to be at the office to make sure that, I mean, all our programs were up and running. And probably if I had been paid, maybe we wouldn't have a surplus then, but I just volunteered my time to do that. So we had a surplus, and we are trying to work with that. So that's why we are not asking for the 137,000 as we got for the past 2 years. Thank you.
We're trying not to ask you for more money than we need.
Thank you, because my question to the other fee for services is we're trying to reduce basically the tax burden on folks. And so I was going to ask, if we reduce you by 5%, what would the impacts be? By my calculations, you're already doing a reduced ask of about 40%. So I won't ask my next question. So thank you.
Thank you very much. You would have been pushing us too much to the wall.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you very much. I think we just need some clarification here. You guys haven't been in your new building for 9 years. You've been in there for just over 4 years, because it was May of 2016. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Okay, so we were talking 9 years earlier?
Yes.
Thank you, Ryan.
No, 2001. We moved there 2001, but this
2011.
2011.
Okay. Yeah, 2011. But this funding we are requesting for, that was like my predecessor appeared 2017. That was for 4 years that he was asking for the funding for 2017, 18, 19, and that's what he was asking for.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're clear on the building location on 6th Avenue. you've been in there since 2016, not 2011.
I think that's correct.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure we were clarified on that. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Thanks, Ryan. I was feeling old.
Councillor Higgin. Acting Mayor Higgin.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you very much for that presentation. Just had a question here. When I was my first term getting on council, I know it was around the time of this opening up, so we've already had that conversation. And the idea was with moving to that building, there would be revenue, which we understand that it's been difficult to rent out building space, et cetera, to offset some of the costs and to become sustainable. And I can't recall the amount of time, but it was to be sustainable in the future with those extra revenues that would come in from room rentals, et cetera. Is that the main reason that the concern is, and that it's still not to a sustainable level, is because of the room rentals, et cetera? Or can you help me understand a little bit about that?
Yes, the room rentals is one of the avenues that we get some money from, and some of our programs that we run as well. I think I listened to this thing 2 years ago, and I don't think you had a time frame within which we had to become self-sustainable. But that is what the board is working at. We're trying to make sure that we close the loopholes and try to save as many as we can, so that somewhere along the line, we don't have to be coming here every year requesting for money and increase that kind of thing. So that is what the board is working at. But as we stand now, we don't have a timeline as maybe the 5, 10 years or 20 years to become self-sustainable. We don't have that in on paper.
All right. Thank you very much.
Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. Just wondered on revenues in that building, has there ever been, or could there be an opportunity to sublease a portion of your building to an office space? Or has that ever been considered?
So currently we do have one of the offices rented out, and we have 2 other offices, one of which was rented out, but because of COVID, we lost that rental as they weren't having any revenue coming in. And so currently I have 2 offices that I can rent out, and I'm trying to rent out. Unfortunately, there's a lot of space for rent right now. We also rent out part of our parking lot for revenue. We try to keep the majority of it for events and rentals. We also rent out some storage space for revenue. So we're trying to do many things to create more revenue. And of course, the plan that I had when I came aboard in January was to increase facility rentals, which I believe I can do, but during COVID, I cannot do. That's a struggle for sure, but it's definitely in the strategic plan to grow that and to try to make our events a little bit more sustainable too, where we can create a little more revenue off them.
Good, thank you.
There are no more questions in the queue. Dr. Witter, Ms. French, thank you very much for coming. We will deliberate this later this week.
Thank you so very much.
Now move on to item 4.11, and it's Nikkei Yuko Japanese Garden.
Good afternoon. I'm Colin Hirano, board member and vice president of the Japanese Garden Society. With me is our executive director, Michelle Day, whose job it is to answer all of the difficult questions you may have. Now, I should note that actually I won't be following the PowerPoint very closely, so you can just review that for your information. And in addition, there's a lot of information in our written submissions that about our past performance and our projected operational costs that I won't be going through in detail here, given the time restrictions. But I would like to highlight the following. The garden has experienced unprecedented growth over the last several years and has managed to keep its attendance relatively high during this last season, despite the innumerable challenges posed by COVID. The garden's prominence as a tourist attraction has continued to increase. This season, we saw 49% of attendees actually come from Calgary alone, which, in my view, shows that the garden's reputation as a tourist attraction that's both provincially, nationally, and worldwide being recognized for its significance. I'd also like to just take a moment to highlight the exceptional work that our staff did, including Michelle, in coming up with imaginative ways of having interactive and engaging activities this past year. Again, our numbers for attendance were at 11,000 opposed to the 24 we had the year prior for the summer season. But given that we had several months in which we couldn't operate at all, our view is that we've done quite well to maintain interest and provide an experience that's both safe and enjoyable for our guests. And of course, I should point out that the society could not have made this progress without the continued support of the city. In 2018, the city approved funding for a cultural center at the garden. Construction of the cultural center is already underway, as you well know, and is scheduled to be completed in 2021. In 2019, the city approved an increase in operational funding in the amount of $171,000 and $171,000 and change. And this, of course, is above the $133,000 that's already set out in our existing fee-for-service agreement. The same funding was provided in 2020, and today we're seeking to receive the same level of funding for both 2021 and 2022. In addition to the continuation of this operational funding, we'd also seeking intern transitional funding for the years of 2021 and 2022. The Society has already committed $122,000 of its own funds for the purchase of all furniture, fixtures, and equipment in the Cultural Center, and has set aside and earmarked $100,000 for the creation and installation of all exhibits at the Cultural Center. The Society is also committed to renovating the existing visitor center so that it can serve as a space that would focus on the horticultural side of the garden and as a change room for our staff. These financial commitments, of course, are significant and do represent a significant portion of any reserves that the garden does have. However, we do expect in 2021 and 2022, the Society will incur additional costs associated with this major undertaking, and so we're requesting supplementary funds for this transition period in the amount of $50,000 for 2021 and $99,000 for 2022. So for clarity, that's $50,000 extra for 2021 and $99,000 extra for 2022. Again, this is to cover the increased HR and auxiliary costs that we expect to occur as we transition from the current arrangement we have to now managing a much larger facility on behalf of the city. In our view, in order to effectively operate a tourist attraction that has on average 40,000 guests per year, and likely much more once the cultural center is complete, and is required to operate and maintain 3 separate buildings that would be under our responsibility, at least in terms for the management of those, then we'll need more than the 3 full-time employees we currently have employed under our current employment level. Now, our hope is that the city will provide these additional funds in order to allow the Society to make this transition, as this will allow us to most effectively manage and promote the world-class tourist attraction that Lethbridge has created. Subject to any questions?
Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Thank you very much. My question is to the City Manager. Mr. City Manager, did we give, this is more of a broad question, but did we tell all these organizations, committees, commissions to find ways to show a cut of 5 to 10%?
Councillor Parker, not the fee-for-service entities. They submitted these requests some time ago, and council deferred them to Finance Committee for the budget deliberations. The 5%, 10% went to boards and commissions.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Appreciate that.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Serrano. Thank you, Ms. Day, for all the information and presentation that you've given us. A couple questions. I do recall the request for an extra 50,000 to commemorate the building, and then the extra 99 for 1 full year of operations. Pardon me. I do recall those requests coming in. Those are one-time asks. Those are not ongoing, correct?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, so thank you. So those council could look at as one-time from perhaps reserves or other sources. But now getting back to the ongoing funding, I believe it's 305,000 a year.
That's
that
correct.
You received. Thank you, and that is up from 134,000 2 years ago.
Yes.
Okay, so that's already increased by 170,000 a year. What I've been asking all of our fee-for-services is this: if council asked you or said we need to find a 5% savings, and I'm looking probably out of that 305 a year, has your board, your organization, your admin done any work on how you could accomplish that?
So I don't believe that our board is, or our administration has turned their mind to that exact question, but certainly we've been live to ways of controlling costs and keeping costs at a minimum. I'd say if there was a reduction of 5%, I mean, this funding does go for the employment of the 3 full-time staff, quite skilled staff that, in our view, quite have a strong reputation given the work that they've done and require fair compensation for that exceptional work. So there might be some issues with both their hours and the benefits that we could provide them. I think the other thing that to keep inside with a 5% reduction from the city is that a significant portion of our revenue is actually generated through ticket sales and other private services we provide. And it's difficult to say that how much what we'd be able to do if this next year is anything like the coming year, and exactly how drastic the cuts would be. But in the worst case scenario, again, most of our reserve funds are earmarked for the cultural center, and we may face a cash crunch where we're faced with a difficult choice with either not being able to keep our employees off, or not being able to afford to furnish the building in the manner that we think is best and proper.
Okay, thank you for that. I just know that other entities, when I've asked the same question, have talked about service reductions. If there was a 5% reduction in our basic fee for service, that there may have to be service reductions. Is that something you'd be looking at?
So, why don't you?
Yes, we'd have to look at service reductions due to going from looking after 2 physical spaces to 3 physical spaces. So then I would have to ensure that I spread the staff out to ensure proper service and maintenance and operations of all 3 sites. So yes.
Thank you, Ms. Day. And if those service reductions were necessary, would that necessitate reopening and renegotiating our fee-for-service agreement with you?
I think that that's probably true that we may have issues with fulfilling all of the obligations that we have under the current fee-for-service for amount significantly reduced than what we're already receiving.
Thank you, Mr. Renault. Thank you, Ms. Day. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. City Treasurer, did you want to add something?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Shero. I just wanted to clarify Councillor Carlson's comment about the ongoing amount. My understanding, and based on what's included in the sheet, is the ongoing request is $171,190 per year. So I just wanted to clarify that. I just maybe heard that wrong, but it sounded like it was both years added together ongoing.
Yeah, just for the sake of clarity, under our existing fee-for-service, we have 133,000 and change, and we in 2019 had 171,000 approval, which again we received another 171,000 in 2020.
Okay, can you perhaps help me out there then? Because in your financial statement you provided under income model, under city funding, it says 304,890.
Doesn't look like it's all city money, though.
So I'm not sure exactly where you.
It just says city funding.
Yeah.
I can answer that question. It's not just the fee-for-service that's in there. So if there's other city funding, such as other initiatives like snow removal that the society received on a case-by-case basis, we put it under there as city funding. So if there's other funding that event grants or whatever that we apply for in those years, that's why that number is different.
Councillor Carlson, are you asking about the green budget sheet?
Yes.
So
where it says city funding, 304,890, 304,890, then it jumps to 354,890, then 403,890. So we don't provide that city funding directly to you. We provide it to Snow. Like, I'm not sure how that works, and if that's not part of our fee for service.
So I should clarify.
Maybe Ms. Nixon.
So for 2009, sorry, my apologies for interrupting, sir. For 2019, it's 304,000. For 2020, it's 304,000, and that represents what we've received from under the fee for service, which would be 133, plus the 171 that we have received in additional funding. It goes up in 2021 and 2022. Perhaps somewhat optimistically on the assumption that we'll see the additional funds. We're seeking the 50,000 and the 99,000 that will be granted.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'm just confused. Now I'm hearing 133, 170, and only only the 133 is under a fee for service. The 170 is what? Maybe Ms. Pinkson can answer that.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. I'm just wondering if Mr. Westerson, you could bring up A142 sheet. It's page 151 in the budget review binders. And I just wanted to get clarification that the additional ask over and above the existing ongoing funding that Nika-UCO receives is in 2021 is 50,000 one time and 171,190 ongoing.
That's correct.
And for 2022, it would be 99,000 one time and 171,190 ongoing. So this is over and above what is in the existing base budget for the Nika-UCO Japanese Gardens.
That's correct.
That clarify it for you, Councillor Carlson?
I think so.
So are you good?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor Spearman.
Thank you. Earlier this year, we were looking at
took a second look at whether we should fund the capital for the new project. And we received an operating budget at that time. Is this any different? This is identical to what we were shown back in March.
This is identical with the exception of the one-time ask of the 50 and the 99. It's the same.
So you were looking for the 171, 190 before. And so this is, now you're asking for an additional 50 for 2021 and 99 for 2022, over and above what we saw in March.
That's correct, sir, but at that time, I believe our focus was more on just whether the capital funding would be granted or not.
Fair enough, but I think our concern on council was, if we approved the capital funding, would there be an additional operating cost? And I think the answer back then was no. So that's the concern I think that we're hearing from councillors. I think what we were told was additional staffing wouldn't be required, and that displays would be set up so that visitors could operate those displays and get some interpretation and some information directly from ongoing static electronic displays or videos. So this is a change from what we saw in March.
There's an additional ask, yes.
Thank you.
Sir Parker.
Thank you very much. How much sponsorship do you guys get in regards to community sponsorship corporately?
For the summer season, it was $750. And for the Winter Light Festival corporate sponsorship, we were looking at $20,000 to $22,000.
That's what you were looking at, or were you successful?
We were successful in the $750, and we were successful with like the $22,000 for the Winter Light Festival.
Thank you.
No one else in the queue for questions, so thank you very much for your presentation, and we will be deliberating this later this week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 4.12, Lethbridge Sport Council.
Good afternoon, or I can start. Good afternoon, Mayor Spearman, Deputy Mayor Miyashiro, and councillors. I'm Susan Iman from Lethbridge Sport Council, and in 2018, we requested $90,000 for staff and programs. You approved one-time funding of $55,000 for staff and extended it to 2020. I'm here today to request that this funding be extended for the remainder of the city's financial cycle. This funding provided us with the capacity for more proactive communication and direct sport services to local organizations, and it provided the opportunity to offer free public programming for families with young children. I want to emphasize that we have two target audiences. For families with children under 12, we provide information and programming to encourage an active for life lifestyle. And for local sport, physical activity, and active recreation organizations, we provide support services, resources, and education to help them provide quality and positive experiences. The funding was used to split the program and communication coordinator into two more focused positions, the communication manager and the program and event coordinator. The additional staff gave us an unexpected benefit of having the capacity to support families and organization members during the COVID-19 pandemic shutdown and through the turbulent relaunch. This slide shows how much we were able to support the sport community and families. We continue to support local sport organizations who are primarily run by volunteers with timely communications about health measures, funding opportunities, and other sport-related resources. Our signature programs are valued by our community. Without the extension to the funding, we would still host these 2 events. The challenge we would face is having to say no to other support service requests during the planning months. Kpmg mentioned Sportfest in their Rec and Culture fiscal and operational review. They said, not all residents have the necessary skills, knowledge, or the level of comfort with physical activity and sport pursuits. A number of positive comments were provided on existing programs and events that allow residents to try out different activities. For example, Sportfest, held by Lethbridge Sport Council. The funding grant enhanced our ability to integrate community-driven needs and initiatives to directly benefit children, youth, and families. I'd like to highlight one program. In 2019, we began hosting roving gyms because it nurtures a love for movement and social-emotional learning for preschool-age children and their parents and caregiver. This is what Brittany had to say. It has been great bringing my very active and social 3-year-old to roving gyms to burn off some energy and feel connected to others, especially as the isolation of the pandemic compounds with the isolation of winter. Shelley said, roving gyms is a wonderful indoor activity for my toddler. The equipment is always clean and the facilities are large with lots of room to move. My little one enjoys the freedom to run in a safe, clean place. Our membership has increased 30% year over year in 19 and 2020. More members means we can disseminate more sport-related resources to more people to help make their role easier. We had the capacity to launch our newly designed, more user-friendly website, and we can provide more customized one-on-one support. The learning curve is particularly high for everyone this year. Sport organizations are experts at delivering sport-specific programming. We are here to help with the rest. For example, we provide virtual AGM support, including an online voting platform. In 2018, we asked for the $90,000 to fund staff and programs. You approved, and we're grateful, for funding to hire an additional staff. We successfully found program grants, but wages are very rarely an allowable expense. We thank you for your consideration to extend our new initiative funding to the end of the city's financial cycle so that we have the capacity to manage our programs and support services. Thank you for your time. And I did forget to mention, I have Dave Sane with me, who's our treasurer of the board.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Simon and Mr. Stain, for your information and presentation. Can you just remind me what our current, maybe I'll ask Ms. Painson, what is our current fee-for-service agreement, the value of that with Sports Council? Because I've got a couple different figures here. I want to make sure I'm right.
The 174,280 is our ongoing fee-for-service agreement. We have a separate contract with, or agreement with Rec and Culture to manage Team Lethbridge for the Southern Alberta Summer Games, which is 11,300, and the 55,000 is the new initiative funding.
Thank you very much for that. I've been asking all of our fee-for-service. You've probably heard and are ready for the question. Because council has been tasking our corporation to find some cost savings, some reductions. And I appreciate folks as a fee for service are operating under different guidelines. But if council did go to your organization and said, we need to find 5%, have you or your board or your staff looked at that to see where that could come from?
So our draft 2021 budget is already decreased by about 12%, just because our income will be lower with the circumstances. If the city grant would be decreased by 5%, we would be able to access our admin reserve for that.
Okay, so it wouldn't impact any services you provide then?
Currently, the roving gyms program is the one that's that is uncertain, and that it will be dependent on the new initiative of funding being extended. We can manage with a 5%. We could do that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Ms. Pinkston?
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify, there was a minimum wage adjustment that was done last budget cycle, so that the ongoing funded fee-for-service amount for Lethbridge Sports Council is $185,580.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are no more questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we will be deliberating this later this week. Thank you very much. All right, here we can do that. Or should we, let's just go in here. Yeah. Just 1 second, sorry.
Good? Tony. Gave me a bag of hockey pucks too.
Thank you. Can I get a request to go into closed session, please, from Councillor Campbell? Any opposed? There are none. We are now in closed session.